welcome to the first episode of the second season of Let's Celebrate, a Holiday Origins podcast. I'm your host, Rusty Brown. In this episode, we're celebrating Imbolc. I can't believe I've been doing this for an entire year already. Before we start this episode, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who listened to last season. And I got my Spotify unwrapped in December, and I was surprised that I actually have consistent listeners. And not only that, but this podcast is 3 people's #1 top podcast. And I'm also in 11 people's top 10 podcast. One of you might be my mom, but the rest of you aren't. And it might not be a lot, but it means a lot to me. I was kind of feeling like I was only doing this for myself. So it's good to know that I have you guys out there listening and learning along with me as I'm researching and talking about these holidays. So again, thank you and welcome to the new listeners. I hope you also stick around. So last year I focused on the main American Christian holidays, and as I researched those holidays, I noticed a theme throughout that many of the modern holidays that we celebrate today mostly go back to ancient holidays, and many of those come from the Wheel of the Year holidays, which come from Celtic or Gaelic times. And it's really, like the name suggests, it's the calendar that people in those times went by throughout the year. The days correspond with the solstices and the equinoxes, but the main festivals fell halfway between the solstices and the equinoxes. In my next episode, I will be going on a deeper dive into the Wheel of the Year and its history, etc. But I have noticed that in the past few years, there are a lot more people reconnecting to the old ways of celebrating these days, and some people are creating new traditions to make it more of a modern celebration. I've also noticed that many people who are reconnecting to these holidays identify as witches, pagans, or something that to an outsider or religious people might see as a bit taboo. But I think that it shouldn't matter what your religion or spirituality is, because these holidays really should be celebrated as human holidays, because I think that's really what they were in the past. Many of them are now celebrated as Christian holidays, just with Christian themes. But when you boil it all down, we're all living on this earth together, cohabitating with nature, and these festivals all remind us that there are changing seasons happening around us, as well as within us throughout the year, and that it's cyclical. Celebrating the changing seasons helps us to slow down, become part of nature again, and when we celebrate with ancient traditions, it can be a reminder that many generations have passed through the same cycles we are now experiencing, which is especially important in a culture where many people spend most of their days indoors in front of a screen and don't really experience what's happening outside or even think about it. Now, I'm not an expert on this subject. I researched the holidays for each episode, and I'm learning new things every time I do. I really don't know much about the Celtic Wheel of the Year yet, but what my objective is with this second season is to hopefully find a way that everyone can reconnect to these holidays, to hopefully help us reconnect to the earth, and in return, maybe we can find some peace within ourselves and possibly with others and with the world. Those might be hefty and lofty goals, but hey, you gotta dream big, because if you don't have a dream, how are you gonna make a dream come true? So for anyone new here, this is the podcast. For each episode, I research a specific holiday and discuss the history behind it, how the people before us celebrated it, how it evolved into what we celebrate now, and for this season, since the holidays I will be discussing are older holidays that haven't been popularly celebrated in the recent past, I will be discussing how people have been reconnecting to these holidays and how we can incorporate these traditions and celebrate these old holidays in a new way, in hope that everyone can reconnect to these holidays despite their religious or spiritual background, so that we can reconnect to the earth and its seasons to maybe heal the earth and possibly even find some healing within ourselves. Each episode includes a celibation that's a themed cocktail with the mocktail option to go with the holidays so that you can make it at home to celebrate along with me as you listen. The celibation for this episode is a flowers in winter. This celibation is inspired by Imbolc as the midpoint between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. So for this celibation, I've got the floral flavors of the chamomile to symbolize the coming spring and the burning cinnamon to symbolize both the sun's return and the winter's flame coming to an end. And the citrus is the all-seasonal flavor to bring them together. To make this celibation, you need 1 to 2 ounces of rum, depending on how strong you want your celibation, juice from a quarter of a lime, a quarter cup of chamomile and cinnamon tea, and you're going to sweeten your tea as you prefer with honey, maple syrup, or sugar, or whatever whatever is your preference. And then you're going to garnish your drink with a smoking cinnamon stick. And then you can either extinguish that cinnamon stick into your drink for a smoky infusion, or stick it ember up and inhale the Christmas time scent as you sip. For a mocktail, make the chamomile and cinnamon tea and sweeten as you like, and just squeeze in the lemon or lime juice. And then chill or pour over ice if you want it to be cold. You can also top with sparkling water or a ginger ale for more of a depth of flavor if you prefer, and then garnish it with that smoking cinnamon stick for the winter flair. My cinnamon stick was not quite tall enough for my drink, so when I lit it and then I put it in there, and then it extinguished on its own, but it does have a really nice smoky cinnamon flavor to it. So for last month's episode, I celebrated Christmas, and this Christmas was my first Guatemalan Christmas, which was a much different experience from all the American Christmases I've celebrated in the past, mainly because of the weather. I've always associated chilly weather with Christmas time, and it never got below 85 degrees during the day and about 65 at night. So it never really felt like what I associate with like a white Christmas, snowy, chilly, sitting by the fireplace. That's what I associate with Christmas, because that's what I've always had. I did decorate my house with lights and garland and of course a Christmas tree. And several towns around us decorated their town centers. So I visited those to see the lights, and I went to the mall to take some pictures with their giant tree. Here in Guatemala, everyone celebrates Christmas on the 24th. If I asked anyone what they were doing for Christmas, everyone told me what they were doing on the 24th instead of the 25th, because everyone just goes to the beach on the 25th, and it's more of like a day of relaxation. So on the 24th, my little family was invited to a family friend's Christmas dinner. We ate and played games after. Then the kids set off fireworks. All the kids stayed up until midnight and set off the biggest fireworks at that time. We could hear fireworks going off all around us, all around our neighborhood. And besides the fireworks, it was fairly similar to the Christmas Eves that I celebrate with my own family in Arkansas, with the games and dinner and just being with family and friends. And then on Christmas Day, I invited some friends and family over, and I cooked a Christmas brunch like my mom always does, and we opened Christmas presents, and then we headed to the beach and spent the afternoon at the beach with pretty much the entire town. There were posadas processions that happened in my neighborhood, but I never got a chance to make it to one. A posada procession is a sort of representation of Mary and Joseph's search for a place to stay for Mary to give birth to baby Jesus. So for several nights leading up to Christmas Eve, a group of people carrying an effigy of Mary and Joseph, I believe, they passed by my house, and I heard them playing instruments and singing songs, but since it was dark, I never really saw it very well. But from what I have read and what I've talked to other people, I'm pretty sure they were carrying the effigy of Mary and Joseph and possibly baby Jesus. And so for each night, they carry the effigy to a house who's waiting with food and sometimes a meal, or sometimes things like cake or coffee, or cake and coffee. And each night, the effigies are left at the house, and then they are carried the next night to the next destination until Christmas Eve. So if you listened to last month's Christmas episode and possibly incorporated some new to you traditions into your celebrations, I'd love to hear about how you celebrated. Did you give Christmas gifts to loved ones? Did you do an act of charity to help the less fortunate, like Charles Dickens would have wanted you to? Did you decorate your house and put up a Christmas tree? What kind of food did you indulge in? You can email me at letscelebratepodcast@gmail.com with your celebratory stories. I also have an Instagram page, and that is at Let's Celebrate Podcast. And if you prefer to watch the episodes on YouTube, I also have a YouTube channel, and that is youtube.com/@Let's Celebrate Podcast. And if you are currently watching this episode on YouTube, you can comment your celebratory stories in the comments. So I would really love to hear how you celebrate Christmas. So now, on to the first episode of Season 2 of Let's Celebrate, a Holiday Origins podcast. So let's start with some Imbolc history. Imbolc is celebrated at the beginning of February. It is the cross quarter festival that is the midpoint between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. It's the time of year when spring begins to emerge, the days finally begin to feel a little longer, a little brighter, new animals are being born, new buds are beginning to bloom, and winter is slowly melting away. Since it's the midpoint between the winter solstice and the spring equinox, if you're being technical, it can actually fall between the 2nd and 7th of February when using the astronomical winter solstice and the astronomical spring equinox. But it is now most commonly celebrated on February 1st and 2nd. It's spelt Imbolc, but pronounced Imbolc. It corresponds with the Christian festival St. Bridget's Day on February 1st and Candlemas on February 2nd. St. Bridget's Day is a feast for the St. Bridget, Ireland's patron saint, and Candlemas is a feast day commemorating the presentation of Jesus at the temple. It falls 40 days after Christmas, which marks the end of the postpartum period. It's called Candlemas because many people bring candles that symbolize Jesus as the light of the world to the church to be blessed and to be used for the rest of the year in their homes. Imbolc seems to predate both of these Christian festivals. There's mention of Imbolc in early Irish literature dating back to possibly the 8th or 9th century, as well as a few passage tombs or earthen burial chambers in Ireland that align with the sunrises of both Imbolc and Samhain, which suggests that Imbolc was most likely an important date since the Neolithic times. The most common meaning for Imbolc comes from the Old Irish word Imbolc, which means in the belly, and is believed to be a reference to the pregnant sheep that are present at this time of the year. It is spelled Imbolc. It's also been linked to the Old Irish verb folcame. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. That's spelled Folcaim, and that means to wash or cleanse oneself. It was the French Celtic linguist Vendres who suggested that it referred to a ritual cleaning, similar to the ancient Roman festivals Februa or Lupercalia, which also took place at this time of the year. If you want to learn more about Februa and Lupercalia, check out my Valentine's Day episode from last season where I discussed their relationship to Valentine's Day. There are several other hypotheses from where the root word derived, but they all are related to milk, cleansing, budding, and overall have the essence of springtime newness. Imbolc is one of the fire festivals in the Wheel of the Year, so throughout history, it has been celebrated with fires either indoors or outdoors, depending on how the weather is in the area. Bridget, or Saint Bridget, is a very prominent figure in Christian and pagan lore. According to Christian documents dating from the 7th century, Bridget founded an important monastery in Kildare in the 6th century and eventually gathered a cult following that led to her getting a feast day observed on February 1st. But there's actually not much historical evidence that Bridget ever lived. And it's mostly just stories and anecdotes of her miracles that actually have deeper roots in Irish pagan folklore. The Irish pagans had a goddess named Bridget who was associated with wisdom, healing, poetry, protection, domestic animals, and blacksmithing, which are also traits that happen to be associated with Saint Bridget. The goddess Bridget is a fertility goddess, so it's believed that she was associated with Imbolc because it is when the sheep start to mate or give birth. And speaking of little baby sheep, I is a baby goat. Hold on a second. I gotta pick you up. Hi. Hi. Oh. Oh, you're so sweet. Oh, you're so sweet. We might do the rest of the episode with you in my lap because you're so cute and snuggly. Also, the name Bridget means bright, high, or exalted, which links to the brightness of the sun and early spring. Apparently, there's a legend that says that the Saint Bridget was a wet nurse to Christ, and the association with milk and Imbolc may have been a reason to make her saint's feast day on this day as well. A tale from early Irish mythology called the Wooing of Immer from the 10th century says Imbolc is when the ewes are milked at spring's beginning. It's believed that Imbolc stems from the breeding cycle of sheep and corresponds with the beginning of their lactation. After a long cold winter, the milk supply and the other dairy products would be running low. The farmers would have been ready to begin milking again. Imbolc marks the time when grass is beginning to grow again, and sheep can survive much better than cows on little vegetation, so they would have been the first animals producing milk in the old days. Imbolc comes as a reminder of the arrival of the baby lambs in sheep milk. This time of year is also associated with the idea of rebirth because of this. The earth is coming back to life in order to help the animals bring forth new life, which in return feed us humans and keep us alive. An old Irish poem in the Hibernica Manora had verses about the 4 seasonal festivals, and for Imbolc it said, tasting of each food according to order. This is what is proper at Imbolc. Washing the hands, the feet, the head, which suggests a form of ritual cleaning was done at this time of year. Imbolc was mainly associated with food production and focusing on the preparation of sowing in the spring. Even with the Christianization of the holiday, there's still a focus on preparing of the agricultural year. So how was Imbolc celebrated in the past? In ancient Ireland and Britain, Imbolc celebrations evolved into a festival to honor the goddess Bridget because of her association with fertility. She was worshipped by the Fillid, a class of Celtic poets and historians, since she oversaw poetry, crafts, and prophecy. Bridget was also said to be a triple goddess and was associated with, quote, the fire in the head, the fire in the forge, and the fire in the hearth. And as such, it was common to celebrate with poetry at this time. A side note about Bridget, the practice of keening is attributed to have started with Bridget. Keening is the tradition for Irish and Scottish women to wail or vocally mourn for the dead at funerals. In pre-Christian times, Imbolc would have began the night before. People would prepare by creating an effigy of Bridget with things like rushes and bundles of oats. They would adorn the effigy in a dress, and some people put dried flowers to symbolize winter in one hand and fresh flowers in the other to symbolize the coming spring, and place her in a basket overnight. On February 1st, or Imbolc, they would celebrate with lighting bonfires and burning lamps as a tribute to Bridget, since she's associated with fire, the hearth, and smithcraft. Alright, bye. I just want to apologize for the wind. It's not cooperating with me today. It was a beautiful day outside, so I thought it would be a good idea to record, and plus we've got the cute little baby goats running around. But the wind is just not helping me. The Shrine of Bridget in Kildare, Ireland, for the St. Bridget is home to a perpetual flame. According to a Welsh chronicler, in the 12th century, the nuns there attended to a fire built in St. Bridget's honor, and that the fire had burned for 500 years without producing ash, and only women were allowed to tend to it or even be in the proximity of it, and it burned until the 16th century. In 1993, the leader of the Brigidline Sisters, Sister Mary Teresa Cullen, relit the flame in the Market Square in Kildare, and in 2005, the Kildare County Council commissioned a sculpture to house the flame in Kildare Town Square. And on St. Bridget's Day in 2006, the perpetual flame was lit in the town square from the flame tended by the Brigidine Sisters at Solstice Bride. The Brigid light is still guarded and tended at Solstice Bride, as it was in Kildare many centuries ago by the Sisters of St. Bridget. The flame is seen as a beacon of hope, justice, and peace for Ireland and our world. I found it interesting that on the Solstice Bride website that explains that the sacred flame was burning in Kildare in pre-Christian times and that priestesses would gather on the hill of Kildare to tend their ritual fires for the goddess Bridget, invoking her to protect their herds and to provide a fruitful harvest. So, how did Imbolc evolve into the holiday it is today? As I said before, the goddess Bridget was adopted by Christianity as Saint Bridget, one of 3 Irish patron saints. Or there may have been an actual Saint Bridget, but they have a lot of parallels which seem more than a little coincidental. She's the patron saint of Irish nuns, newborns, midwives, dairymaids, and cattle, and was known for her agricultural knowledge at an early age. And the monastery that she's known for establishing just so happens to also be the site of a shrine for the goddess Bridget. Like I said, there was a flame that had been burning for goddess Bridget that the Saint Bridget tended to, and then her nuns kept alive for 500 years. When the church began celebrating St. Bridget's Day, instead of Imbolc, they celebrated with a feast day for her. It was traditional to wash an effigy of St. Bridget of Kildare in the ocean and surround it with candles to dry it. Making Bridget crosses is another tradition. These are cross talismans made from stalks of wheat or rushes. St. Bridget's cross is believed to come from pagan roots. Also, most of them actually use a swastika-style design where the arms are not parallel with one another and create the illusion of movement like a wheel. The swastika, of course, has roots deeper than Nazi Germany. St. Bridget's cross traditionally was hung on the kitchen wall or over entryways to protect the house from fire and evil. The Christian holiday Candlemas corresponds with Imbolc as well on February 2nd and has been celebrated since the 4th century in Greece. Candlemas is also similar to Imbolc in that it's a celebration for the returning of the light after the darkness of winter. It's also believed that it stems from the Roman holiday Februaria, which is a purification and cleansing celebration, as I mentioned earlier as well. Candlemas also was traditionally celebrated by bringing candles to church to be blessed for the year. So now, how do people celebrate today? Since Imbolc is a climate-specific holiday, nowadays some people choose to celebrate when it feels most appropriate to them. So if it's still snowy, they may wait a week or two, or if it's warmer, they may celebrate a little earlier. Or as I mentioned before, they may calculate it using the astronomical winter solstice and the astronomical spring equinox. For Wiccans, modern pagans, and even some Christians, Bridget is still the central figure for Imbolc. Many people still make Bridget crosses or a Bridget dolly. They may hang it up for protection in their home or give them out to friends. And since Imbolc is one of the fire festivals in the Wheel of the Year, of course, many people still celebrate with a fire or even just a little candle ritual inside their home if the weather isn't permitting for a bonfire. People also celebrate by spending time in nature and the warmth of the sun, contemplating the new growth in the coming spring. And because Bridget is associated with poetry, there are usually music and poetry festivals held around Imbolc. So how can we celebrate Imbolc now? Since most areas are still too cold to start planting, this is a good time to begin thinking about what you want to plant in the coming year. This can be both literally or figuratively. You may have set resolutions or intentions for the new year, so this is a good time to reflect on those and see where you're at and what seeds you can plant to make them a reality. This time of the year is actually more like a new year with the earth coming back to life rather than the time of year we traditionally celebrate the new year in the dead of winter when many places there's still snow or ice on the ground and the earth is still very much asleep. There are also many ways you can use candles to celebrate Imbolc. Have a candlelit dinner either as an intimate affair with friends or make it a romantic dinner for two with your partner or love interest. Decorate a room in your home with candles and take time to either meditate or journal in the candlelit space. If you attend a church that celebrates Candlemas, bring your candles to be blessed for the year. And since the days are getting longer and the sun's beginning to shine brighter, spend some more time outside. Go for a walk. Take time to just breathe in the change of the season. A good way to do this is to take 5 to 10 minutes a day or whatever feels right to you for a few days before and after Imbolc to go outside and just close your eyes and breathe. Listen to the wind. Feel the sun's warmth. Listen for new life, maybe birds chirping, and just pay attention to the change in the energy. If it's not too cold where you're at, you can even practice earthing, which is just taking your shoes off and touching the ground with your bare feet. This is a great way to connect to the earth and really feel the change of the season. It's almost like plugging into the earth, if you will. And if it's not too cold where you're at, then a bonfire in the evening can be a perfect way to end your day outdoors. Hearty foods are associated with Imbolc. Things like baked goods, roast meats, winter veggies, seeds, dried fruits, and of course milk, cheese, and butter. So if you decide to have a candlelit dinner, add these items to your menu. You can also make a Bridget's cross or Bridget dolly. You can find tutorials on YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram. I saw so many different people making these this year, so yeah, you can make it with things called rushes. Never heard of them, but you can make them with a rush. Also, since Imbolc is associated with cleansing, you can do some kind of cleansing ritual to celebrate, either cleansing of your space or your body or both. For your home, this is the time to do spring cleaning, tidying up, organize, donate things that you no longer use. I recently learned about sound cleansing your space. I was feeling some kind of like negative energy in my house, so I decided to do this. It's just you walk around and clap or make sounds into the corners of your room. I think it's about moving stagnant energy around in the space. And then I saged my entire house afterwards because you can never be too safe from the negative energy, right? For your body, a candlelit bath with aromatherapy scents of spring or maybe fresh flowers or herbs if they're available. Imbolc is mainly the celebration of the return of the sun, its warmth, and the power it has to bring the vegetation back to life. It's also about renewed life and hope for the future. So when you're thinking about what to do to celebrate, be sure to incorporate these themes. This is why fire in the form of a bonfire or indoor candles are synonymous with Imbolc. The fire's heat symbolizes the light and warmth of the sun. I have also included a link that you can find in the resources in the show notes that have Imbolc rituals if that's something you're interested in doing this year. As a closing thought, I'd like to say this holiday and the two Bridgets go to show that Christians and pagans aren't really that different in the way they celebrate, and I hope that this can bridge the gap and help some people realize that, as John Denver said, "Yet as different as we are, we're still the same." This holiday has been celebrated for centuries, and despite the label the people gave themselves at different times during those centuries, the basic themes continue to be the same, even until this day: hope, rebirth, a celebration for the return of the light. And the fact that those have lived on and continue to be celebrated today is pretty powerful. So that wraps it up for this episode of Let's Celebrate, a Holiday Origins podcast. I hope that you stuck around and weren't too annoyed by the wind because she really wanted to be part of this episode today. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next month to do a deeper dive into the Celtic Wheel of the Year. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, please like and subscribe, maybe even leave a review. Do you celebrate Imbolc, or are you planning to celebrate this year? Or do you celebrate St. Bridget's Day or Candlemas? I would love to hear your celebratory stories. Feel free to send me an email to letscelebratepodcast@gmail.com, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Let's Celebrate Podcast and YouTube at youtube.com/@letscelebratepodcast. As always, all of my references are in the show notes if you're interested in reading more about Imbolc traditions. Thanks for listening and joining me on this adventure. I hope you've learned something new today. Have fun celebrating. Bye!